we are getting really close to starting this engine, but before we do, we've got to get the ignition timing set. Welcome to Urban Monk TV. So hey guys, welcome back. Just a quick kind of catch up as to where we are and what's left to do on the Cafe Racer, because we are nearing the end of this project in relative terms. This kind of project is one where you may never really be done. You know, it's like a painting. When do you stop putting the brush to the canvas and say I'm finished here? Some plans that I have for this bike. Clearly I need to get the ignition timing done. We're going to do that here in this episode. I had talked about mounting the oil pressure gauge here in the oil galley on the crankcase. I did receive the plug that I ordered for this. I ordered an aluminum one that was cheap off eBay, and I can drill it and tap it for the correct threads for that gauge, which is a pipe thread rather than a metric thread like the crankcase is. So we have to adapt that. I'll do an episode just of that. That won't be here in this video. Well, unless this goes so quickly that we have time. And then I'll start the engine. Here's a question for you. I'm toying with the idea of either doing an episode called First Start or doing a live broadcast with First Start. Now with live, that means viewers have to schedule watching it, you know, if they want to see it live. But then after the live broadcast, that video is available, you know, ongoing, and you can watch it at your leisure. The only thing with that is I'll be using a different camera. I'll be using the camera in my phone because that'll, you know, wirelessly upload right away live. And, you know, a little herky-jerky having to move the camera around. There's no editing with live. It just is what it is, and it could get a little drawn out. I don't know. You guys let me know in the comments how you'd like to see me do that First Start video. I'm curious to know. And then the other thing that this bike needs, any bike needs, is I got to put the license plate on. And I've got some running lights, or, you know, license plate illuminator lamps for that. And I've got an idea of how I want to do that that's a little bit involved and might actually turn into a couple different videos. And then with tuning, there's another video. We probably should be ready to ride. Let's get into the timing. The tools I'll need for this job are a 17mm socket on a ratchet, or you could just use a 17mm opened or box end wrench. But we need that to turn the crank over and position our timing. Next thing we need is some kind of visual way to know when we've made the electrical contact precisely. And so, you know, if you get the old service manual, they talk about this specialized tool that just makes a noise, and I think back in the day they called them a buzz box. And when you would get your timing set right, it would buzz and you knew that you had signal going. You know, I'm not going to build a buzz box. I think there's probably YouTube videos out on there, but you just need a way to know that juice is flowing, and visually I think works as well as audibly. So I've got a test light for that to make things easier in hooking this up, because I want both hands free, and you'll see later why I think two hands is important for this job. I've got just some test leads that I'm going to use to hook this thing up so that I don't have to hold it. Alternatively to the test light, you could use an older style voltometer or multimeter, not a digital one,
so that, you know, the needle moves and you have that visual cue that juice is flowing. What I don't like are the digital type, because these things take too long to put their reading up on the display, and you really don't know if you have kind of sort of contact instantly. You just want to just see it, like bam, right now I want to see whether I'm sending juice or not. And with the test lead, if it's kind of weak, it'll actually be real dull, and you also can see an arc happening between the two contacts. So I'm going to use a test light. And one more thing, just a little bit of some very fine, clean, I'm not going to use this portion, I'll use out here, but fresh, this is wet dry 2000, or just emery cloth or something. Correction, 19 millimeter. I thought that was 17 millimeter. I think the crank bolt on my V-Strom is 17 millimeters, so sorry about that. 19 millimeter. And important thing here, don't turn your engine over counterclockwise. Go always in the direction that the engine runs. Some bikes that isn't going to matter, some it does, and as a general rule, it's just easier to always go with the direction of travel. So what do we have here? There's a lot to say about these things. First, I think might be fun to talk a little history. These old contact point sets, guys would, you know, everybody seemed to smoke cigarettes, and guys would always be carrying around a book of matches, and they would use a matchbook on the road if they thought they had a trouble with this as the, you know, gap setting, and then the abrasiveness of that cardboard. They could run it back and forth in their points, and they would clean out those contacts. So, you know, a little history of old motorheads. I imagine many of them are no longer with us because of lung cancer, but that was how it was kind of done in the day. And I grew up with my dad's friends kind of operating that way. They would do that on lawnmowers, they would do that on whatever. It was kind of the farmer's approach. So what do we have here? We have this backing plate mounted by 3 screws, and if you loosen these 3, that whole plate can move, which changes the orientation of both contact sets over this cam. Behind this screw is a cam with a lobe to it. And what else? This is an oiler, so you need to put just a little bit of a thick grease on this thing. And I noticed that mine is kind of a memory to it, to where it's not even contacting the cam anymore. So I'm probably going to pull that out and turn it around, re-oil it, or you can replace it. A lot of times the the points and condenser set will come with a new oiler pad or foam. Then you have adjustment screws here and here for numbers 2 and 3. So this is 1 and 4 and 2 and 3. Cylinders 1 and 4, cylinders 2 and 3. It's a 4-cylinder bike, and it's called a wasted spark system. So when cylinder number 1 is going to be firing in the power stroke, number 4 is also going to get a spark in its exhaust stroke. And that spark, of course, is doing nothing because the valve is open, the exhaust valve is open at that time. There's no compression, and it's a wasted spark, thus the name. You know, obviously that's going on 2 and 3 also. So there's always a wasted spark here. Conversely, then, when number 4 is in the power stroke, number 1 is getting a spark to no end because, again, there's no compression. So there, I've said it. And then inside, behind this plate, you have the advance. And as we are, maybe you can see down in here, there are springs on that advance and weights. And so, I don't know if I can get a picture of the weight. That's sort of it right there. Sorry. That's the weight. And when I'm turning this over by hand or anything below, you know, like idle to I think 2500 RPM, let me confirm that with this service manual, then those weights are in and the advance is, you know, set at a certain timing point. As the crank spins faster, the centrifugal force of those weights drives them outward and advances the lobe on these two contact points. And so from 2500 RPM and above, your spark comes sooner in the, you know, before top dead center. Let me talk a little bit about that. So looking through this hole, you see up above on this backing plate, right there, there's a mark. That is our timing mark. And as you rotate, there. Now you'll see that there is a mark below that is, I don't know if you can see it. So that is the advanced spark timing mark. The next line that is going to appear is F for fire. And so that is when we want the spark to go off, just slightly before T, top dead center. And this is for numbers 1 and 4. I don't know if you can see that in there. If I go around again, you see a 3. Oh, you can't see that. Hang on. There's the 3 and a 2 before it, so it's 2 and 3. And that is the advance mark, the firing mark, and top dead center. So right now, when the engine's not running and we're not at speed, what we're going to concern ourselves with is F. And we want to start with 1 and 4. Why, you say? Well, notice that the contact point for 1 and 4 are screwed rigidly without adjustment to this backing plate. So to adjust these, you have to move the whole backing plate. Then, once that is set, then you need to be able to move 2 and 3 independently of that, and you can see how this is designed in a way that these two screws allow you to swivel 2 and 3 without affecting 1 and 4. So I'm going to leave it at the advanced firing point right now. Now I need to get the gap set. Opening that gap and closing that gap, depending on, of course, you want to make sure you've got the crankshaft position in a way that the lobe is pressing here and rotating this out to open it. And to adjust then is this screw and this screw on each of the point sets. You know, for example, if I want to, like right now, the 2 and 3 is open. If I loosen these two screws, I can affect changes in that gap and then tighten these down accordingly. Let's set this first. So the service manual states that you want your points gap to be between 3/10 and 4/10 of a millimeter, so 0.3 to 0.4. I've got that range on my feeler gauges here is 0.305, close enough, call that 0.3. There's 0.4. So in this range is all good. If you use your feeler gauges for other things like valve tappet clearance, get the oil off of them before you use them for this task. And essentially you'll just put that in here and set this gap. So first, let me adjust this. Okay, so now we're open. Can I get a 3 in here? When I put that in, I'm actually, I don't know if you can see that movement, I'm actually forcing it open some. So the gap is actually less than the thickness of this feeler gauge. So I need to adjust. Use a JIS screwdriver here. There we go. So I can put the gauge in to where it's loose, the feeler gauge, and then just rotate it till it's just snug. And then I'm just going to hold that while I carefully snug these up. And I'll check it. Now I'm pretty loose, loosened up on me. There. Now I've got the gauge, feeler gauge in there, and it just sprang onto it. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten up with the gauge in place. And then I know I'm good. Same thing on the other side. Now my screws are already loose there. But let's make sure we are in the open position. Okay. But that sprang back after I did that. So that's not good. Now we don't want it to spring back tighter. It's finicky. Okay. Snug. Don't strip them. Okay, that's nice. And that's nice. Points gap is set. Now let's get timing for 1 and 4 done. So we've got 2 ends of our test light, circuit, and we want one to go onto here. You can literally just put it on this contact, but see, this thing is so bulky that I don't want to use that. That's why I have these test leads. Then the other end needs to be grounded. We want to be grounded to the engine. And again, I don't want to be holding this because I need both hands as I adjust and work the screwdriver. So that's where the other lead comes in. And then here I can just ground to the engine. Now, I gotta put this somewhere where you can see it. How about that? I think that'll work. Let me adjust my camera. So, as I rotate around as I come up on the 1 and 4, there's advance. Oh, there my light came on. So my contact just opened up. So I'm firing way too soon. As you can see, the F mark is way that way, but I've already got my light on. So what I want to do is take this entire backing plate, which is loosening these 3 screws, then set my crankshaft right to that fire mark. perfect. And then I want to rotate the whole plate. Am I on 1 and 4? Yes. Okay, so here's my problem. As I rotate, when I'm on the fire mark for 1 and 4, I rotate this all the way and I'm not making enough of a change in the contact point to get the light to go off. If I'm back at advance, so here's 1 and 4, the advance mark, here I can affect some change. What that's telling me is that my point set is so worn that it needs to be replaced. I've lost so much material there that, you know, that gap essentially has eroded away with use and time. I got to order a new point set. So I'm kind of glad this happened in this video. There are 2 different sets of contact breakers or points that were on the 550, the GS550. I, for whatever reason, believe I have a B model motorcycle because as far as a lot of other parts go, it's always been the B parts diagram that has been the parts I have. But on a B, and you guys have to determine which one you have, on a B, it's a Nippondenso breaker set, and on the others, it's a different manufacturer. I hope I pronounce this right, Kokusan. But here's what you got to look at. It's the orientation of these condensers. If they are mounted like this is supposed to be the Kokusan according to the parts diagram. On the other parts diagram for the Nippondenso, they're oriented in a completely different way. So regardless of what bike you think you have or what engine, look at how these are oriented and order the right one. I have the Kokusan here, so they're mounted this way, and if you have the Nippondenso, they'll be mounted kind of this direction. Order the one that's right for you. Okay guys, so here's what I've determined. A lot of times I get requests for how did you find the parts, or where do I go to find the parts. So I thought in this case I would maybe include a little bit of this process that is normally behind the scenes for my work on this GS550. But points, the points contact or contact points set, they are sold as right hand and left hand in the Suzuki parts breakdown. And if you go to one of the Suzuki parts sellers or to the dealer, you buy a left hand or a right hand, which seems pretty silly to me, given that why would anybody replace one and not the other? Okay, so they're like 75 US$ per side. So just those contact points through Suzuki OEM, I'm looking at $150. Well, that's a no-brainer. I'm going to go ahead and purchase an electronic ignition set if I'm going to spend that kind of money. So not doing that, but I kept looking, and there are a couple other brands out there. One is K&S, and then there's some others that really don't seem to have a brand name at all. They're made in China, so are the K&S. And ultimately on eBay I was able to find both the right hand and left hand for $18.71 for a brand new set. Or for $29.95 or $29.50, whatever, 30 bucks, I could buy the set left and right with the condensers. The condensers, I mean, I know mine are working because I was riding this bike and sometimes they go bad, rarely. So, you know, is it a bit of a risk to buy without the condensers? Not really. They're so cheap that if I have a problem with it, I can order them up again as a separate item for $10, and I'm still in the same ballpark,
total price range. But that's what I found on eBay is available. So what's the downside? Of course, I do have to wait for these to be delivered. I think it's going to take about 7 to 10 days, something like that. So brief pause in the video